The kitchen was quiet at 6:47 a.m., which should have been my first warning. Leo's lunch sat half-assembled on the counter: turkey sandwich, apple slices, a juice box I'd forgotten to freeze. I was spreading mayo on wheat bread when Olivia came down the stairs wearing Natalie's blazer, the Navy Theory one she'd left draped over the chair in the master bedroom last night. It hung past Olivia's wrists, the sleeves rolled twice, and she wore it like armor she hadn't earned yet. "That's your mother's jacket," I said. "She left it." Olivia didn't look at me. She grabbed the lunch bag I'd made and shoved it into her backpack with more force than necessary. "You know she's not coming back tonight, right?" I stopped spreading. "It's a board retreat, Liv. She'll be back Sunday." Olivia finally looked at me, and there was something in her eyes I didn't recognize, not teenage attitude, not sarcasm. It was pity, the kind you give someone who's about to walk into a room where everyone already knows the secret. "Okay, Dad." She walked out the back door before I could ask what she meant, the screen door slapping against the frame. I stood there with the butter knife in my hand, watching her cross the lawn toward my truck, and I told myself she was just being 16. That's what I told myself about a lot of things. The school drop-off was the same as every other morning, which made it worse. Mountain View High School sat at the end of a long driveway lined with parents' SUVs and minivans, exhaust pluming in the February cold. Tyler argued about a video game he wasn't allowed to play, something called Phantom Protocol, and I told him for the third time that his grades had to come up before we talked about screen time. He slumped in his seat and said, "You never let me do anything," in that voice that's equal parts whine and genuine hurt. Olivia was out of the truck before I'd come to full stop. She walked toward the double doors without saying goodbye, the blazer flapping around her thin frame like a flag I didn't recognize. I watched her until she disappeared through the entrance, and then I sat there for an extra minute, engine idling, try to shake the feeling that I'd missed something important. A black Mercedes sat at the curb 3 cars ahead. The driver was on his phone, a man in a dark suit, his face half turned away. I didn't think anything of it. I pulled out and headed to the office, the heater blasting against the February cold. Mountain View High School occupied a sprawling campus off Hayden Road, the main building a 2-story stucco structure with a faded mural of the school mascot near the front entrance. My classroom was on the 2nd floor, room 214, windows facing the parking lot. I unlocked the door and flipped on the lights. 20 desks in rows. A whiteboard covered with notes from yesterday's lesson on the Federalist Papers. My coffee cup sat on the corner of my desk, still half full from the morning. I didn't teach first period. I had prep, which meant grading and meetings. I sat down and opened my laptop, but I couldn't focus. The image of Olivia in Natalie's blazer kept replaying in my head, the pity in her eyes, the certainty in her voice. She'd said she's not coming back like it was a fact, not a guess. I pulled out my phone and called Natalie. It went straight to voicemail. "Hey," I said. "It's me. Call me when you get this. Olivia said something weird this morning, and I just want to make sure everything's okay." I hung up and stared at the screen. No callback, no text. I told myself she was in a meeting. That's what I told myself. Second period arrived. AP U.S. Government. 23 students, including Derek Vance, who sat in the back row with his arms crossed and his eyes on his phone. I taught the lesson on checks and balances, but my voice sounded distant, like I was listening to someone else speak. I kept glancing at the clock, waiting for something I couldn't name. At the end of class, I asked Derek to stay. He waited until the room emptied, then walked up to my desk. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with his father's confidence in the set of his jaw. "What's up, Mr. Cole?" "You're great, Derek. You're failing." He shrugged. "I know. I need to meet with your father. I've sent 3 emails. He hasn't responded. He's busy." The words came out flat, rehearsed. "I understand, but this is serious. If he can't come in, I can do a phone call. I could do a Zoom. I can meet him at his office if that's easier." Derek looked at me for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes, not guilt, not defiance. Recognition, like he was seeing me for the first time and didn't like what he found. "I'll tell him." He left. I watched him walk down the hallway, his hands in his pockets, his stride unhurried. I didn't know why, but I felt like I'd just lost something I hadn't known I was fighting for. The school fundraiser was that Friday night. A silent auction in the gymnasium, catered by a local barbecue joint with a live band playing covers of classic rock songs. I went because I was head of the social studies department and attendance was expected. I wore a blue blazer and khakis, the same thing I wore to every school event. Natalie said she had a client dinner. She'd texted me at 4. Late meeting. Don't wait up. I walked through the gym, shaking hands with parents I recognized, making small talk about college applications and standardized tests. The band played Brown Eyed Girl. Someone handed me a plastic cup of lemonade. The gym smelled like pulled pork and floor wax, and the particular desperation of adults trying to pretend they were having fun. I saw Bradley Vance before he saw me. He stood near the auction tables, a glass of whiskey in his hand, talking to a group of parents I didn't know. He wore a charcoal suit with no tie, and his gold signet ring caught the light when he gestured. He laughed at something someone said, and the sound carried across the room like it owned the space. I walked toward him. I don't know what I planned to say. Something about Derek's grades. Something about the emails he'd ignored. Something about how his son was going to fail my class if he didn't show up and take responsibility. I stopped when I saw her. Natalie stood beside him, her hand on his arm, her head tilted back as she laughed at something he'd whispered in her ear. She wore a black dress I'd never seen before. Her hair was different curled, softer. She looked like a stranger wearing my wife's face. Bradley's hand rested on her lower back, just above the waistband. The same hand from the photo. The same gold ring. The same casual ownership in the way his fingers pressed into the fabric. I stood there, frozen, the lemonade warm in my hand. The band played on. The parents talked. The auction paddles sat on the tables, waiting for bids. And my wife stood with another man's hand on her spine, laughing like she hadn't laughed with me in years. Natalie turned and saw me. Her face went pale. She stepped away from Bradley, but it was too late. I'd seen everything I needed to see. The way she'd leaned into him. The way his hand had found its natural resting place. The way they fit together like they'd been practicing. "Ethan," she said, "it's not what you think." I didn't answer. I looked at Bradley. He looked back at me, calm, unbothered, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. He didn't move his hand. He didn't step away. He just stood there, waiting to see what I would do. "Mr. Cole," he said, "I was just telling your wife about a property I'm interested in." I set the lemonade down on the nearest table. "We need to talk, Natalie." "Not here. Now." She looked at Bradley. He nodded, just slightly, like he was giving her permission, like he was the one who decided when she could speak to her own husband. She followed me out of the gymnasium, into the empty hallway where the fluorescent lights hummed overhead and the sound of the band faded to a dull throb. "Tell me the truth," I said. She didn't hesitate. "I'm in love with him." The words hit me like a physical blow. I leaned against the wall, my legs unsteady, the cinder block cold through my blazer. "How long?" 14 months. 14 months. I repeated it, trying to make it real. "You've been lying to me for 14 months. I didn't mean for it to happen." "Don't." My voice came out harder than I expected. "Don't give me the speech. Just tell me what you want." She looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the woman I'd married. The woman I'd loved for 18 years. The woman who'd held my hand when Olivia was born, who'd cried at her father's funeral, who'd kissed me goodbye every morning for almost 2 decades. Then she blinked, and she was gone. I want a divorce. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I stood in that hallway under the humming lights, and I watched my wife walk back to the man who had taken her from me. Her heels clicked against the linoleum, steady and sure, and she didn't look back. I drove home alone. The house was dark. Olivia's door was closed, a sliver of light showing underneath. Tyler was asleep, his breathing steady through the monitor I still kept in his room, even though he was 13. I sat in the living room, in the dark, and I waited for the morning to come. The house had never felt so empty. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room until the gray light of dawn crept through the blinds, watching the shadows shrink across the floor like time-lapse photography. At 6:47, Olivia's alarm went off upstairs, the same generic iPhone chime she'd had since 8th grade. I stood up, stretched my back until it cracked, and walked to the kitchen to make coffee like it was any other day. Like my wife hadn't just told me she was in love with another man. Olivia came down at 7:15, already dressed, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, so tight it pulled at her eyes. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked at me with that expression she developed over the past year, the one that said she was seeing more than she let on. "You're still in your clothes from yesterday." "I know. Where's Mom?" I poured her a cup of coffee, black, the way she'd started drinking it 6 months ago without telling me. She took it without thanking me, wrapped her hands around the mug, and sat down at the kitchen island. The ceramic clicked against the granite. "I saw you leave the fundraiser last night," she said. "I saw her come back without you. You should have told me." "Told you what?" "That you were the only person in this house who didn't know." She set the mug down harder than necessary. "I've known since October, Dad. I saw them at the mall. She told me it was a client." I checked her phone when she was in the shower. I leaned against the counter, my own coffee untouched, the steam curling up and disappearing. "Why didn't you say something?" "Because I didn't want it to be true." Her voice cracked, just slightly, before she caught it and locked it down. "I thought if I didn't say it out loud, it would go away. That's what you do, right? You pretend everything's fine until it has to be something else." The words landed harder than she probably intended. I didn't respond because she wasn't wrong. Tyler came down at 7:45, still in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes with the heel of his hand. He looked at me, then at Olivia, then back at me, his face cycling through confusion and suspicion and settling on fear. "Why is everyone being weird?" "Sit down, buddy." I pulled out a chair. "I need to tell you something." He sat. I told him. I kept it simple. Mom and I were getting a divorce. She was going to live somewhere else for a while. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't anyone's fault but the adults. He listened with his hands folded on the table, his knuckles white, his face completely blank. When I finished, he said, "Is she coming back for my stuff?" "Your stuff." "I have a project due Friday. A diorama. It's in my room." I wanted to tell him that was exactly what mattered, that a project was something you could control, something that made sense when nothing else did. Instead, I said, "I'll help you with it." He nodded and went back upstairs without another word. Olivia watched him go, then turned to me, her eyes hard and young and old at the same time. "He doesn't get it yet." "He will." "I know. Are you going to fight her?" "I don't know what that means." "It means that you're going to let her take everything. Or are you going to make her work for it?" I didn't have an answer. I still didn't have an answer when I dropped them off, Tyler at the middle school, Olivia at the high school, watching them walk through the double doors like nothing had changed, like their backpacks weren't carrying the weight of a broken house. I drove to Mountain View in my gray Tacoma, parked in my usual spot under the pepper tree, and walked into the building with my teacher badge clipped to my lapel like armor. Maggie Chun was waiting for me outside my classroom. She had a cup of coffee in each hand, and she held one out to me without a word. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and I realized she'd probably been up half the night worrying about me. "Bad night?" she asked. "You could say that. I heard about the fundraiser. People were talking." She followed me into the room and closed the door behind her, leaning against it. "What did you see?" "Everything." I set my bag down on the desk. "She told me she wants a divorce. She's been seeing Derek Vance's father for 14 months. Maggie set her coffee down so hard it sloshed over the rim. "Bradley Vance? The developer?" "The same. Jesus Ita." She ran a hand through her hair, leaving it standing up at odd angles. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to teach my classes. I'm going to pick up my kids. I'm going to figure out how to live in a house that doesn't feel like mine anymore." "That's not what I mean." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "He's going to come after you. Men like him don't just take your wife, they take everything else too. Your reputation, your job, your kids. He's got the money to make it hurt." I looked at the clock. First period started in 7 minutes. Let him try. The day passed in a blur of lectures and worksheets and students who didn't know their teacher's life had collapsed. I taught about the Constitutional Convention, about compromise and conflict, about how the Founding Fathers had fought and betrayed each other and still managed to build something that lasted. I didn't tell them that sometimes the betrayal was the only thing that survived. Derek Vance sat in the third row, taking notes, and I couldn't look at him without seeing his father's hand on my wife's back. At 3:15, I drove to the middle school to pick up Tyler. He got in the car without a word, his backpack thudding against the seat, his face turned toward the window. At 3:30, I picked up Olivia from the high school. She sat in the back, scrolling through her phone, her jaw set so tight I could see the muscle jumping in her cheek. We were halfway home when she said, "Mom texted me." What did she say? She wants to take us to dinner tonight. Just her and us. No, Dad, not tonight. Tell her you'll talk to her tomorrow. Olivia typed something, then put her phone down. She said she loves us. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I know she does. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat in the living room and opened my laptop. I Googled Bradley Vance. I read about his developments, his lawsuits, his 2 previous divorces. I found a photo of him at a charity gala, arm around a woman who wasn't his wife, smiling like he owned the room because he probably did. I found a blog post from a former employee who'd sued him for wrongful termination and lost everything in the process. I found a review of his company on a real estate forum that said, "He'll shake your hand and steal your watch, and you'll thank him for it." At 11 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "You're out of your league, Cole. Take the deal she offers, or I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of husband you really were." I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering in my throat. I didn't respond. I saved the number, took a screenshot, and sent it to Maggie. She replied 30 seconds later, "Save everything. You're going to need it." I closed my laptop and walked upstairs. I checked on Tyler Furs, who was asleep, his dinosaur clutched to his chest, his diorama half finished on his desk, a glue stick uncapped and drying out. I checked on Olivia next. She was awake, staring at her ceiling, her phone glowing on the nightstand like a coal. "He's going to try to take us from you," she said, her voice flat and distant. "Mom already told me. She said she wants full custody. She could try. She's already talked to a lawyer. Bradley's lawyer. She told me he's the best in the state." I sat on the edge of her bed, feeling the springs groan under my weight. "I'm not going to lose you, Liv. Either of you." She looked at me, and for a moment, she was 14 again, the age she'd been before everything fell apart, before she learned to hold her emotions at arm's length. "Promise?" "I promise." She didn't say, she believed me. She didn't have to. I saw the hope in her eyes, fragile and flickering, like a candle in a storm. I kissed her forehead and walked out, closing the door behind me. I stood in the hallway, in the dark, and I thought about Bradley Vance's text. I thought about his hand on my wife's back. I thought about his son in my classroom, failing my class, and how I'd have to look at him every day and pretend I didn't want to break his father's jaw. I went downstairs and called the only person I knew who had been through something like this. "My father," answered on the 3rd ring. "Ethan, it's late. I know. I need advice." He was quiet for a moment, and I could hear him settling into his chair, the one he'd had since I was a kid, the leather cracked and worn. "Is this about Natalie?" Word travels fast. "Maggie called me. She thought I should know." He paused. "What do you need?" "I need to know how to fight someone who has more money, better lawyers, and no conscience." "You don't fight him the way he fights. You fight him the way you fight, with evidence, with patience, with the truth. You document everything. You keep your head down. You don't give him a reason to paint you as the villain. And if he does it anyway, then you make sure the people who matter know the truth. Your kids, your colleagues, your friends." His voice softened, and I heard the weariness in it, the memory of his own war. "I'm sorry, son. I know this isn't what you expected. Neither was Mom leaving. But you got through it. I got through it because I had you. You'll get through this because you have those kids. Don't forget that." I hung up and sat in the dark, the phone warm in my hand. Outside, the street was quiet, the neighbors' houses dark, the world going on like nothing had changed. But everything had changed, and I was just beginning to understand how much I had to lose. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Thursday, 3 weeks after Natalie left. I wore my only suit, navy blue, off the rack from Men's Warehouse, the same one I'd worn to funerals and parent-teacher conferences, and the one time I'd been called to the principal's office for a student discipline issue. It felt thin now, like the fabric had been stretched across something it wasn't designed to cover. The family courthouse in downtown Phoenix was a beige box of a building, the kind of place designed to drain hope out of you before you even walk through the doors. I arrived early, 30 minutes before the hearing, and found Maggie waiting for me on the steps with a paper cup of coffee that tasted like burnt regret. "You look like hell," she said. "Thanks. You look like a woman who's been divorced twice." "I have been. And I'm telling you, whatever happens in there today, it's not the end. It's just the beginning of the middle." She handed me the coffee. "Drink it. You'll need the caffeine to stay awake through the bullshit." I took a sip and nearly gagged. "Where'd you get this?" "The vending machine in the lobby. It's the only thing open at this hour." We walked inside together, past the metal detector and the security guard who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The courtroom was on the third floor, room 312, a small chamber with wooden benches and fluorescent lights that hummed like a dying insect. Natalie was already there, sitting next to a man in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my truck. Bradley Vance's lawyer, I assumed. He had the kind of haircut that said, "I bill at $800 an hour," and the kind of smile that said, "I know something you don't." Natalie looked at me when I walked in. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse and a navy blazer, professional and composed, the same outfit she wore when she was closing a deal. Her hair was pulled back, her makeup perfect. She looked like she'd slept. I looked like I'd been sleeping in my car. "Ethan," she said, and her voice was soft, almost apologetic. "Natalie." She started to say something else, but the bailiff opened the door to the judge's chambers, and we all stood. Judge Patricia Holloway entered, a woman in her late 50s with silver hair, cut short, and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked like she'd seen every kind of broken family walk through her courtroom and had stopped being surprised by any of it. "Please be seated," she said, settling into her chair. "This is a preliminary hearing in the matter of Cole versus Cole. We're here to establish temporary custody, temporary support, and temporary use of the marital residence." She looked over her glasses at both sides. "I've read the filings. Let's see if we can find some common ground before we start burning daylight." Bradley's lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, for the record, I'm Harold Finch, representing Mrs. Cole. My client is seeking primary physical custody of the minor children, temporary use of the marital residence, and temporary spousal support pending the final dissolution." I stood, my palms sweating against the wood of the table in front of me. "Your Honor, I'm Ethan Cole. I'm representing myself." Judge Holloway raised an eyebrow. "You're pro SE?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Mr. Cole, I'd advise you to retain counsel. These proceedings are complicated, and the stakes are your children." "I understand, Your Honor, but I've spent the last 3 weeks learning the rules, and I believe I can present my case effectively." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. Let's hear from Mrs. Cole's counsel." Harold Finch laid out Natalie's case with the precision of a surgeon. He talked about her stable income, her flexible schedule, her ability to provide continuity for the children. He talked about my emotional instability and my inability to co-parent. He mentioned the hostile work environment I'd created at the school by continuing to teach Derek Vance, as if I'd had any choice in the matter. He painted a picture of a man who was unraveling, a man who couldn't be trusted with the care of his own children. When he finished, Judge Holloway turned to me. "Mr. Cole, your response?" I stood again, my heart pounding in my chest. "Your Honor, I've been the primary caregiver for my children for 18 years. I make their lunches. I drive them to school. I help with homework. I attend their games and their concerts and their parent-teacher conferences. My wife," I stopped, corrected myself. "My soon-to-be ex-wife has been working 60-hour weeks for the last 3 years. She's been traveling. She's been," I paused again, choosing my words carefully. "She's been building a life that didn't include me or the children." "That's not true," Natalie said, her voice sharp. "Mrs. Cole, you'll have your turn," Judge Holloway said. "Continue, Mr. Cole." I pulled out a folder I'd brought, filled with printouts of Natalie's calendar for the last 6 months. "Your Honor, I've documented my wife's schedule. She missed Olivia's fall concert, Tyler's science fair, and 3 parent-teacher conferences. She worked through Christmas break. She was out of town for Tyler's birthday." I slid the folder across the table. "I'm not saying she's a bad mother. I'm saying she's been absent, and I'm the one who's been here." Harold Finch stood. "Your Honor, this is a transparent attempt to smear my client's character. Mrs. Cole is a successful professional who provides for her family. Mr. Cole is a teacher who I'm aware of what Mr. Cole is, Judge Holloway said, cutting him off. She opened the folder, flipped through the pages, and closed it again. I'm going to make a temporary ruling. Mrs. Cole will have primary physical custody of the children, with Mr. Cole having visitation every other weekend and one evening per week. The marital residence will remain in Mrs. Cole's possession pending the final hearing. Mr. Cole will pay temporary child support in the amount of, she glanced at the financial statements, $1,200 per month. The room went cold. I felt the blood drain from my face. Your Honor, I said, my voice cracking, I can't afford that. I'm a teacher. My take-home pay is $3,400 a month. After my rent and my car payment and my Mr. Cole, the court has made a ruling. If you'd like to contest it, you can file a motion for reconsideration. But for now, these are the terms. I sat down, my hands shaking. Natalie didn't look at me. She stared straight ahead, her face unreadable, as if she'd already won and was trying not to smile. The hearing ended 15 minutes later. I walked out of the courtroom in a daze, Maggie following close behind, her hand on my elbow like she was afraid I'd collapse. $1,200 a month, I said, my voice hollow. She gets the house. She gets the kids. I get to see them every other weekend. It's temporary, Maggie said. It's not the final ruling. She's going to take everything. Bradley's going to make sure of it. We walked out of the courthouse into the Arizona sun, and I felt like I was drowning in it, the heat pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't shake. I sat on the steps, my head in my hands, and I thought about Olivia's face when she'd asked me to promise. I thought about Tyler's dinosaur, clutched to his chest like a talisman. I thought about the text from Bradley Vance, the one that said I was out of my league. He was right. I was out of my league, but I didn't have the luxury of quitting. I pulled out my phone and called my father. He answered on the second ring. How'd it go? I lost. Temporarily. Dad, she got everything. The house, the kids, $1,200 a month. I'm going to be living in a studio apartment, eating ramen noodles, while she's driving her BMW and planning vacations with her boyfriend. He was quiet for a moment, and I could hear the weight of his years in the silence. You know what your mother said to me when she left? She said, "You're a good man, Frank. But good men don't always win." That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you think. She was right. Good men don't always win. But they don't quit either. They keep showing up. They keep fighting. And eventually, the truth comes out. I don't have time for eventually. The kids are with her right now. Bradley Vance is a phone call away from my daughter. Then you need to change the narrative. You need to show the court who he really is. You need to find something that makes him the villain, not you. I looked up at the courthouse, at the flag waving in the breeze, at the people walking in and out with their own broken stories. How do I do that? You start digging. You talk to his ex-wives. You talk to his former employees. You find the cracks in his armor, and you drive a wedge through them. I hung up and sat on the steps for a long time, watching the traffic crawl by, the heat shimmering off the asphalt. I thought about Bradley Vance's text. I thought about his hand on my wife's back. I thought about his son, sitting in my classroom, failing my class, and how I'd have to look at him tomorrow and pretend I didn't know what his father had done. But I wouldn't pretend forever. I stood up, brushed off my suit, and walked to my truck. I had work to do. I spent the next 3 days doing what I do best, research. The difference was that instead of building a lesson plan on the Federalist Papers, I was building a case against a man who had stolen my family. I sat in my empty classroom after school, the lights off, the blinds drawn, my laptop glowing in the dark like a confession. Maggie had given me a list of names. Patricia Vance, the second ex-wife. Cynthia Vance, the first. A former project manager named Dennis Ochoa. 3 subcontractors who had filed liens against Vance Development Group and lost. I started with the easiest target, public records. Arizona is a public records state. Divorce filings, civil lawsuits, tax liens theory, all sitting in county databases, waiting for someone to care enough to look. I pulled Patricia Vance's divorce file first. It was 347 pages. I read every single one. The marriage had lasted 12 years. Patricia had filed for divorce in 2019, citing irreconcilable differences, but the deposition told a different story. She described a pattern of control. Bradley monitored her phone, tracked her car, limited her access to joint accounts. He'd isolated her from her friends, her family, anyone who might tell her she deserved better. When she finally left, he'd fought for full custody of their daughter Morgan, not because he wanted her, but because he knew it would hurt Patricia. The judge had given Patricia primary custody anyway. Bradley got every other weekend and a monthly child support payment he'd fought to minimize. The deposition included an email from Bradley to his attorney. "I don't care what it costs. I want her to suffer. She thinks she can take my daughter? She's going to learn what happens when you cross me." I read that email 3 times. Something cold settled in my chest, not quite anger, not quite fear. It was recognition. I was looking at the same man who had sent me that text. The same man who had his arm around my wife's waist. The same man who was now using Natalie as a weapon against me. I printed the email and put it in a folder. Cynthia Vance's divorce was older, filed in 2005, finalized in 2006. The file was thinner, only 82 pages, but it told the same story. Bradley had married her right out of college, built his company while she worked as a receptionist to support them, and then left her when he started making real money. No children, no alimony. She'd signed a prenup that left her with nothing but a used Honda and a storage unit full of furniture. I found her on Facebook. She lived in Tucson now, worked as an office manager for a dental practice. I sent her a message. "My name is Ethan Cole. I'm going through a divorce from a woman who left me for Bradley Vance. I think you might understand what I'm going through. I like to talk." She responded within an hour. "I don't talk about him. Ever." I replied, "I'm not asking you to relive anything. I'm just trying to protect my kids. He's already threatened me. I need to know what I'm dealing with." She didn't respond. I didn't blame her. Dennis Ochoa was harder to find. He'd left the construction industry after his lawsuit against Vance Development and was now working as a security guard at a casino in Laughlin, Nevada. I called him from a burner phone I'd bought at a gas station. "Mr. Ochoa, my name is Ethan Cole. I'm a high school teacher in Scottsdale. I'm in the middle of a custody battle with a man named Bradley Vance, and I was told you might have some insight into how he operates." There was a long silence. I heard the beep of a slot machine in the background, the murmur of voices. "Why should I talk to you?" His voice was rough, tired, the voice of a man who had been ground down by the system. "Because I'm losing, and I think you know what it feels like to lose to him." Another silence. Then, "What do you want to know?" "Everything." He told me about the project that had ruined him. A mixed-use development in Chandler. Bradley had hired his company as the general contractor, then stopped paying after the first phase was complete. Ochoa had kept working, kept paying his crew out of his own pocket because Bradley had promised the money was coming. It never came. By the time Ochoa filed a lien, Bradley had already transferred the property to a shell company. The lawsuit dragged on for 2 years. Ochoa's company went bankrupt. He lost his house, his marriage, his retirement. He smiled the whole time, Ochoa said. In the depositions, in the hearings, in the mediation. He sat there in his $1,000 suits, and he smiled at me like I was a bug he was about to step on. And you know what? He was right. I was a bug. I didn't have the money to fight him. I didn't have the connections. He crushed me, and there was nothing I could do about it. I felt a cold dread settling into my bones. What do I do? How do I beat him? You don't. He's got more money, better lawyers, and no conscience. The only way you win is if you find something he cares about more than winning. And I don't think he cares about anything that much. He cares about his son, Derek. Ochoa laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. He doesn't care about Derek. He cares about what Derek represents. A legacy, a trophy. He's not going to let you take that away from him. I hung up and sat in the dark, the phone hot in my hand. I thought about Derek Vance sitting in my classroom, failing my class, and how I'd never once seen Bradley at a parent-teacher conference. I thought about the 3 cancellations, the excuses, the way Derek flinched whenever I mentioned his father's name. I had an idea. It was dangerous. It was unethical. It was probably illegal. I didn't care. The next morning, I arrived at school early, before the hallways filled with students and the smell of stale coffee and floor wax. I unlocked my classroom, sat at my desk, and pulled up Derek Vance's academic file. It was password protected, but I knew the system I'd been teaching long enough to memorize the default admin credentials that no one ever bothered to change. I scrolled through his grades. He was failing 3 classes, mine, AP English, and Chemistry. His attendance was spot I'd missed 12 days in the last semester alone. There were notes from the school counselor, a woman named Diane Harper, documenting 2 meetings about emotional distress and family instability. I opened the file Diane had attached to the second meeting. It was a handwritten letter Derek had written to her, part of a therapeutic exercise. The handwriting was jagged, uneven, the letters pressed hard into the paper. I don't know why I'm writing this. She says it'll help. It doesn't help. Nothing helps. My dad doesn't look at me. He looks through me. Like I'm a window. Like I'm a receipt he's about to throw away. He talks about my future like it's a business deal. He wants me to go to ASU, study business, work for him. I don't want to work for him. I want to be a photographer. He laughed when I told him. He said, that's not a real job. He said, you're not going to waste my money on a degree that doesn't pay. He said, you'll do what I tell you to do. I don't want to do what he tells me to do. I don't want to be him. I'd rather be nothing. Sometimes I think about driving off the road, just closing my eyes and turning the wheel. I wonder if he'd even come to the funeral. I wonder if he'd cry. I don't think he would. I closed the file. My hands were shaking. I sat in the dark classroom, the computer screen, the only light, and I thought about the boy who sat in the back row, who never raised his hand, who stared out the window like he was looking for a way out. I thought about my daughter, Olivia, who had known about the affair for months and didn't tell me because she was trying to protect me. I thought about my son, Tyler, who clutched a stuffed dinosaur like it was the only thing in the world he could trust. I thought about Bradley Vance, who had built an empire on the wreckage of other people's lives, and who was now using my wife as a battering ram against me. I printed the letter. I put it in the folder with Patricia's deposition and the email about making her suffer. I locked the folder in my desk drawer and walked out of the classroom just as the first bell rang. I had a class to teach. I had a student who needed to know that someone saw him, and I had a war to win. But first, I had to survive the day. The classroom hadn't changed in 19 years. Same beige walls, same flickering fluorescence, same faint ghost of chalk dust and adolescent sweat that no amount of custodial work could ever fully erase. But the boy in the back row was different now. Derek Vance sat with his hood pulled tight around his face, his eyes fixed on the window where palm trees swayed in the dry March wind. He hadn't turned in a single assignment in 2 weeks. I knew because I'd been checking. I taught the lesson on checks and balances the way I always did the Louisiana Purchase. The New Deal, Brown versus Board of Education, keeping my voice steady and my eyes moving from face to face like I was scanning a battlefield for tripwires. When I reached Derek, he was already looking at me. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow, the kind of hollow that comes from staring at a ceiling all night, because closing your eyes means facing whatever's waiting in the dark. The bell rang at 2:47. Students shuffled out in a river of backpacks and phones, and Derek stayed in his seat like a stone in a stream, watching the empty desk in front of him. Derek, I said his name softly, the way you approach a horse that's been spooked. You want to talk? There's nothing to talk about. His voice was flat, mechanical like he'd practiced it. There's always something to talk about. You're not my counselor. He still wouldn't look at me. You're my teacher. You're supposed to teach me about the government. That's it. I walked to the door and closed it. The click of the latch echoed through the empty room, and Derek's head snapped up, his eyes going wide, his body tensing like he was about to bolt through the window. I'm not going to hurt you. I kept my hands visible, palms open. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to call your father. Then why'd you close the door? Because I want to tell you something, and I don't want anyone else to hear it. I sat in the desk next to him, the plastic chair groaning under my weight. I could smell him sweat and stale coffee and something sour, like fear that's been sitting too long. His hands were shaking, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge of the desk. I read your letter, I said. His face drained of color. What letter? The one you wrote to Mrs. Harper. About your father. About wanting to drive off the road. He stood up so fast the desk screeched across the tile. That's confidential. That's illegal. I'll report you. I'll tell my dad. Sit down, Derek. I'm not sitting down. You're supposed to be the good teacher. The one everyone likes. And you're reading my private, I'm not reading it to hurt you. I kept my voice low, steady, the same voice I used when talking a student down from panic attack. I'm reading it because I see you. I see you sitting in my class every day, staring out that window, and I know what that looks like. I've seen it before. I've felt it before. He stopped. His breath came ragged, his chest heaving under his hoodie. You don't know anything about me. I know your father is sleeping with my wife. The words hung in the air like smoke from a gun. Derek stared at me, his mouth open, his eyes searching mine for the punchline. He didn't find one. What? His voice cracked on the syllable. Bradley Vance. Your father. He's been having an affair with Natalie Cole for 14 months. She left me 3 weeks ago. She took my kids. She took our savings. And your father filed a restraining order against me for harassment. Derek sat down. Not slowly, not carefully collapsed into the chair like his legs had stopped working. He stared at the floor, his hands limp in his lap, and for a long moment I thought he might cry. But he didn't. He just sat there, breathing, processing. He told me she was a client, he said finally. He said she was helping him with a property deal. He's been saying that for a year. It's not true. Why are you telling me this? Because I need your help. He looked up, and something shifted behind his eyes. The fear was still there, but underneath it I saw something else, something cold and familiar. The anger of a boy who'd been lied to by the one person who was supposed to protect him. What do you want me to do? I want you to tell the truth. About your father. About what he's like. About what he did to your mother. I don't have proof. You have your testimony. You have your letter. You have the scars that no one can see. He laughed, a bitter, broken sound that didn't reach his eyes. You think anyone's going to believe me? He's Bradley Vance. He owns half of Scottsdale. I'm just the kid who failed your class. That's not true. It is true. His voice rose, cracking at the edges. I'm the kid who's not good enough. I'm the kid who's not going to ASU. I'm the kid who wanted to be a photographer and got laughed at. I'm nothing to him. I've always been nothing. Derek, I leaned forward, dropping my voice to a whisper. I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen carefully. You're not nothing. You are a 17-year-old boy who is smarter than he gives himself credit for, who has a talent his father can't see because he's too busy looking in the mirror. And you have the power to hurt him. Not physically, not with money, with the truth. What good is the truth? He'll just lie his way out of it. Not if we have evidence. Not if we have witnesses. Not if we have a pattern. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I opened it on the desk between us, spreading out the contents like a hand of cards. Patricia's deposition, the email about making her suffer, the contractor's statement, the shell company documents. Derek's eyes moved over the papers, his lips forming silent words as he read. When he reached the email, he stopped. His hand hovered over it, trembling. He wrote this about his second wife. After the divorce, he said he wanted her to suffer. Yes. Derek looked up at me, and I saw the tears pooling in his eyes. He said the same thing about my mom. After she died, he said it was a relief. He said she was finally out of his way. The words hit me like a fist to the chest. I sat back, my breath catching, my mind racing through the implications. Bradley Vance had said that about his dead wife, the mother of his child, the woman who had raised Derek until cancer took her. I'm sorry, I said. I'm sorry you had to hear that. I heard it. Derek's voice went flat again, hollowed out. I was in the other room. He didn't know I was listening. He was on the phone with his lawyer. He said, it's a relief. She's finally out of my way. I was 12 years old. I didn't know what to say. There are some wounds that words can't touch, some cruelties that exist outside the range of comfort. I sat there in the silence, letting him feel whatever he needed to feel. I'll help you, he said finally. I don't know how, but I'll help you. Thank you. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. When this is over. When he's gone. I need you to help me get out. I need you to write me a recommendation. I need you to tell someone that I'm not just the kid who failed your class. I reached across the desk and put my hand on his shoulder. He flinched at first, then relaxed, then leaned into the touch like it was the first time anyone had touched him with kindness in years. I'll do more than that, I said. I'll teach you how to take a photograph that makes people feel something. I'll teach you how to see the world the way you already see it. and I'll make sure your father never touches you again." He nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "What do we do first?" "We wait. We watch. We build our case. And when the moment is right, we strike." "That's not a plan. It's the beginning of one." I packed up the folder and stood. Derek rose with me, his shoulders straighter than they'd been when he walked in. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something that resembled hope. "Mr. Cole." "Yeah. My dad's having a party this weekend. At the house. He's inviting all his business partners. He's going to show off the new property he bought." "What property?" "The one your wife sold him. The one on Camelback Road. He's been bragging about it for weeks." I felt the gears turning in my head. A party. Business partners. A property bought with money that should have been mine. "I think I need to go to that party," I said. "You're not invited." "I know." Derek smiled. It was a small, fragile thing, but it was real. "I'll leave the back gate unlocked." "You do that?" "He made my mother cry for 10 years. He made me want to die. I do a lot more than leave a gate unlocked." I walked him to the door, and he stepped into the hallway, the fluorescent lights washing over him. He turned back, his hood still up, his hands shoved in his pockets. "Mr. Cole." "Yeah. Thank you for seeing me. I always saw you, Derek. I just didn't know what I was looking at." He nodded and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the empty hallway. I stood in the doorway, watching him go, and I thought about my own children, Olivia, who had seen the truth and tried to protect me from it, and Tyler, who clutched a stuffed dinosaur and asked if his mother was coming home. I thought about Bradley Vance, who had built a kingdom on the bones of everyone who trusted him. And I thought about the party this weekend, the back gate that would be unlocked, and the war that was about to begin. I closed the classroom door and locked it. I had a lesson plan to write, a folder to update, and a future to build out of the ruins of my past. The Saturday of Bradley Vance's party arrived like a held breath, the kind you don't realize you've been holding until your chest starts to ache. I spent the morning in my apartment, spreading the contents of my investigation folder across the kitchen table like a general mapping a battlefield. Photographs, bank statements, the divorce file from Patricia Vance, Derek's counseling letter, which I had photocopied and locked in a safety deposit box at a bank in Mesa, far from the reach of any court order Bradley might try to file. Maggie called at noon. "You sound like you're planning a murder," she said. "I'm planning a reconnaissance mission. There's a difference. I'm not planning to kill anyone. I'm planning to expose him. Same thing in his world. You know that, right? Exposure is death. He'll fight you with everything he has. I'm counting on it." She went quiet. I could hear her breathing, the faint clink of ice in a glass. Maggie drank iced tea year-round, even in January, even when it was 70 degrees outside. "Be careful, Ethan. He's not just rich. He's connected, and he's got nothing to lose. Neither do I. That's what scares me." I hung up and finished my preparations. Dark polo shirt, dark jeans, comfortable shoes that wouldn't make noise on gravel, a small digital recorder in my pocket, the kind that fit in the palm of your hand, my phone on silent, set to record video if I needed it. I had no plan to confront Bradley tonight. I had a plan to observe, to document, to gather the kind of evidence that would make his lawyers sweat. I drove to Paradise Valley in my rental car, a nondescript gray sedan that blended into the neighborhood like a ghost. I parked 3 blocks away on a side street lined with Palo Verde trees and million-dollar homes. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the kind of Arizona sunset that made tourists stop and stare. I walked the rest of the way, my footsteps soft on the asphalt, my eyes scanning for security cameras. Derek had been true to his word. The back gate was unlocked, just as he'd promised. I slipped through it like a shadow, moving along the edge of the property, keeping to the darkness cast by the tall hedges that lined the pool area. The house was a monument to wealth through stories of glass and stone, a pool that shimmered like turquoise under the landscape lights, a patio crowded with people in expensive clothes holding cocktails and laughing at jokes I couldn't hear. I found a spot behind a cluster of bougainvillea, the pink flowers providing cover as I watched. Bradley Vance stood at the center of the patio, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his voice carrying across the crowd like a broadcaster's. He was holding court, telling a story about a deal he'd closed, his hands moving through the air like he was conducting an orchestra. Beside him, wearing a dress I didn't recognize and a smile I didn't trust, was Natalie, my wife. She looked different. Not just the dress, not just the jewelry, there was something in her posture, the way she held herself, that I had never seen before. She looked like she belonged there, like she had always belonged there, and I had been the one holding her back. The anger rose, hot and sharp, and I forced it down. Not now. Not here. I wasn't here to confront her. I was here to gather information. I pulled out my phone and started recording, sweeping the camera across the patio, capturing faces and license plates and the layout of the property. I zoomed in on Bradley's guests, memorizing their faces, cataloging them for later research. Business partners, politicians, maybe a judge or two. I recognized a city councilman from Scottsdale, a man who had spoken at our school's career day 2 years ago. He was laughing at something Bradley had said, his hand on Bradley's shoulder like they were old friends. I was about to move to a better position when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, my heart hammering, my hand already reaching for the recorder in my pocket. But it wasn't a security guard. It wasn't Bradley. It was Olivia. She stood in the shadows, her arms crossed, her eyes fixed on me with an expression I couldn't read. She wore a dress I'd never seen before, something Natalie must have bought her for the occasion, and she looked older than 16. She looked like a stranger. "Dad," she said, "what are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing. Mom made me come. She said it would be good for me to see how the other half lives." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. She's been saying a lot of things like that lately. "I'm sorry, leave." "Don't be sorry. Just tell me what you're doing here." I hesitated. I didn't want to drag her into this, didn't want to make her choose between her parents. But she was already in it. She had been in it from the beginning, keeping secrets, protecting me from the truth I hadn't been brave enough to see. "I'm gathering evidence," I said. "I'm going to take him down." She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine. Then she nodded slowly, like she had been expecting this answer. "I can help," she said. "No, absolutely not. Dad, I know things. I've been listening. I've been watching. Mom talks to him on the phone when she thinks I'm asleep. She's scared of him, Dad. She won't admit it, but she is." "What do you mean, scared?" "Last week, she told him she wanted to come home. She said she made a mistake. And he laughed at her. He said, 'You made your choice, Natalie. Now you have to live with it.' She cried for an hour after that. She thinks she can't leave him. She thinks he'll destroy her." Something shifted in my chest, something between hope and grief. Natalie wanted to come home. She was scared. She was trapped. "I need to talk to her," I said. "Not tonight. He's watching her. He's always watching her. But there's something else." "What?" "There's a man here. He's been following me all night. He keeps looking at me like he knows something." My blood went cold. "What man?" "I don't know his name. He's tall, bald, wears a black suit. He's been standing by the bar for the last hour, not drinking, just watching." I scanned the patio, searching for a tall, bald man in a black suit. I found him near the bar, just as Olivia had described. He was looking in our direction, his eyes fixed on the bougainvillea where we were hiding. "He sees us," I said. "We need to go." "Not yet. I need to get closer to the house." "Dad, he's coming." I looked again. The man was walking toward us, his pace unhurried, his hands at his sides. He didn't look like a guest. He looked like security. "Go," I said. "Go back to the party. Act normal. Tell him you were looking for a quiet place to check your phone. I'll find my own way out. Dad, go, Liv. Trust me." She hesitated, then turned and walked back toward the patio, her heels clicking on the stone path. I watched her go, my heart pounding, my mind racing. The man in the black suit was still coming, and I had maybe 30 seconds before he reached me. I slipped out of the bougainvillea and moved along the hedge, staying low, keeping to the shadows. I found a side door, unlocked, and slipped into the house. The kitchen was empty, the counters covered with platters of food and bottles of wine. I moved through it quickly, my footsteps silent on the marble floor, my eyes scanning for an exit. I found myself in a hallway lined with photographs. Family photos. Derek as a child, his mother holding him, her smile bright and genuine. Morgan, Derek's half-sister, at what looked like a dance recital. And Bradley, always Bradley, standing at the center of every frame, his arm around whoever was closest, his smile a mask I could finally see through. At the end of the hallway was a door. I opened it and found myself in a study, the walls lined with bookshelves and awards, and framed photographs of Bradley shaking hands with men in suits. A desk sat in the center of the room, covered with papers and files, and a laptop that glowed with the light of an open document. I walked to the desk and looked at the screen. It was an email, still open, the cursor blinking at the end of the sentence. The sender was a name I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Nogales shipment, final confirmation." I read the email. It described a shipment of agricultural equipment crossing the border at Nogales next week. The value was listed at $2 million. The destination was a warehouse owned by a shell company I recognized from my research. The same shell company used to funnel money out of Dennis Ochoa's construction business. I pulled out my phone and photographed the screen. Then another, scrolling through the email thread, capturing every detail. I heard footsteps in the hallway. I closed the laptop, slipped out of the study, and found a back door leading to the garden. I moved through the darkness, my heart in my throat, until I reached the gate Derek had left unlocked. I slipped through it and didn't stop running until I reached my car. I sat in the driver's seat, my hands shaking, my phone burning in my pocket with the evidence I had just gathered. I had what I needed. I had the beginning of a case that could bring Bradley Vance down. But I also had something else. I had the knowledge that my wife was scared, that she wanted to come home, and that she was trapped in a gilded cage of her own making. And I had a daughter who was braver than I had ever been. I started the car and drove back to my apartment, the lights of Paradise Valley fading in my rearview mirror. I had a folder to update, a plan to refine, and a war to win. But first, I had to figure out how to save my family without destroying them in the process. I didn't sleep that night. The apartment's kitchen tablia, cheap laminate thing, with a wobbling leg I'd been meaning to fix for 3 weeks, became my war room. I spread the photographs across its surface like a general mapping a campaign, except I had no training for this, no instincts beyond the ones that told me I was in over my head. The Nogales shipment email, the shell company documents, the city councilman's frozen grin at Bradley's party. Evidence of something, but not yet evidence of everything. My phone buzzed at 3:47 a.m. I grabbed it, my heart already hammering, expecting Olivia's name, expecting Natalie's, expecting anyone connected to the life I used to recognize. Instead, an unknown number glowed on the screen. Scottsdale area code. I answered without speaking. Mr. Cole. The voice was male, low, unhurried, the kind of calm that came from knowing you held all the cards. I have a proposition for you. Who is this? Someone who knows what you found in Bradley Vance's study. Someone who also knows that you're a high school history teacher with no legal training, no connections, and no real understanding of what you've stumbled into. I waited. The silence on the line felt like a hell breath. I'm going to send you an address, the voice said. Tomorrow at noon. Come alone. Leave your phone in the car. If you're followed, if you record the conversation, if you do anything stupid, the deal is off and you'll never see your children again. Who are you? I'm the only friend you have in this city, Mr. Cole. And I'm running out of patience. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long time, the screen dark, my reflection a ghost in the glass. Then I called the only person I trusted. Maggie answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep and irritation. It's 3 a.m, Ethan. This better be good. Someone just called me. They know about the party. They know about the email. They want to meet. Who? I don't know. But they mentioned the kids. Don't go. I have to. Ethan, if they know about the kids, they know where Natalie is. They know where Olivia and Tyler are. I can't ignore that. Maggie went quiet. I could hear her thinking, the way she always did when she was calculating odds. Then she said, call the police. The police think I'm a stalker. Bradley has a restraining order. If I go to them with this, they'll arrest me before they listen. Then let me come with you. No, they said alone. Ethan, this is how people disappear. I looked at the photographs on the table, at the email about the Nogales shipment, at the face of the city councilman who had been laughing with Bradley Vance, at the evidence that could destroy a man who had already destroyed my life. I know, I said, but I don't have another choice. I drove to the address at 11:45 a.m. The warehouse sat in an industrial park near the Scottsdale airport, a low concrete building with a roll-up door and a faded sign that had once advertised something I couldn't read. The kind of place where businesses stored things they didn't want anyone to see. The roll-up door was closed, but a pedestrian door stood cracked open, a sliver of darkness visible beyond it. I parked my rental car 3 blocks away, killed the engine, and sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel. I left my phone in the glove compartment. I walked to the warehouse with my hands empty and my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The door opened before I reached it. A man stood in the shadows. He was tall, maybe 60, with gray hair cropped close to his scalp and a face that had seen violence and survived it. His suit was dark and expensive, the kind of fabric that didn't wrinkle. His eyes were the color of slate, flat and unblinking. "Mr. Cole," he said, "thank you for coming. Who are you? My name is not important. What matters is what I can offer you." He stepped back, gesturing for me to enter. I hesitated, then followed him into the warehouse. The space was empty except for a folding table and 2 chairs. A manila folder sat on the table, thick with papers, the kind of thickness that meant someone had done their homework. The gray-haired man sat in one chair and gestured for me to take the other. He said, "Bradley Vance is a problem," he said. "Not just for you. For people you don't know and will never meet. People who have been watching him for a long time." "What kind of people?" "People who don't like it when their business is disrupted by amateurs." "Amateurs. You." He tapped the folder with one finger. "You stumbled into something you don't understand. The Nogales shipment. The shell company. The money laundering. You think you're investigating an affair. You're actually investigating a criminal enterprise that spans 3 states and 2 countries." I felt the blood drain from my face, a cold wash that started at my scalp and ran down to my fingertips. "I can give you what you need to take Bradley down," the man said. "Financial records, witness statements, a timeline of his transactions. Everything you need to make sure he never sees the outside of federal prison." "Why?" "Because he's become a liability, and liabilities need to be eliminated. You want me to do your dirty work. I want you to do what you were already going to do. I'm just giving you the tools to do it faster." He pushed the folder across the table. It slid on the metal surface with a sound like a blade being drawn. I didn't touch it. "What about my children?" "Safe, as long as you cooperate." "Where are they?" "With their mother. In a location Bradley doesn't know about." "Natalie took them?" "Your wife is not the villain you think she is, Mr. Cole. She's been trying to protect your children from a man who threatened to hurt them if she didn't cooperate. She's been playing a longer game than you know." I stared at him. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. "You've been in contact with her." "Indirectly, through intermediaries. She reached out to us 6 months ago when she realized what Bradley was involved in. She's been feeding us information ever since." I thought about Natalie, about the late nights I had assumed were lies, about the burner phone I had found in her glove compartment, about the way she had looked at me when I confronted her to fear in her eyes that I had misread as guilt, as shame, as something smaller than what it actually was. She never told me. She couldn't. If Bradley suspected she was working against him, he would have killed her. "And your children." I sat back in my chair. The warehouse was cold, but I was colder, a deep chill that had nothing to do with temperature. "What do you want from me?" "Take the folder. Use the information. Bring Bradley down. We'll handle the rest." "The Nogales shipment. What's in it?" The man smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. It was the smile of someone who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "Something that will make Bradley Vance very unpopular with his business partners. Something that will ensure he spends the rest of his life in a cell. And if I don't take the folder, then you go back to your apartment. You wait for the divorce to finalize. You watch Bradley Vance destroy your reputation, take your children, and walk away with everything. And in 6 months, when your wife's body is found in a ditch outside Nogales, you'll wonder if you could have done something different." I looked at the folder. It was thick, heavy, full of someone else's war, someone else's secrets, someone else's blood. But it was also full of my only chance. I reached out and pulled the folder toward me. "Good," the man said. "I'll be in touch." He stood and walked toward the back of the warehouse, his footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. I sat alone at the folding table, holding the folder, my hands shaking, my mind racing through possibilities I couldn't hold on to. I had wanted evidence. I had wanted a way to fight back. I had wanted to be the hero of my own story. I had just gotten more than I had ever imagined. And I had just made a deal with someone who was probably more dangerous than Bradley Vance. I opened the folder and started reading. The folder felt like it contained the sum total of my life's worst decisions, bound together with paper clips and printed on cheap bond paper that left ink smudges on my fingers. I read it 3 times in the warehouse, the fluorescent lights buzzing like trapped insects, the silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Each pass through the documents revealed something I'd missed before, a name buried in a footnote, a date that connected to something I'd seen on the news, a transaction number that matched a shell company I'd never heard of. The Nogales shipment wasn't agricultural equipment. It was weapons, military-grade rifles and ammunition, destined for a cartel that operated on both sides of the border like they owned the damn thing. The shell company linked to Dennis Ochoa's construction business was a front for money laundering, and Bradley had been using it to move cash for 3 years, cleaning dirty money through legitimate real estate deals. But the last page was the one that made my hands go still. A photograph of Bradley standing next to a man I recognized from every news broadcast for the past 18 months. The man was under federal indictment for trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. He was currently sitting in a maximum security prison in Florence, Arizona, awaiting a trial that would either put him away for life or set him free on a technicality. The photograph was dated 6 months ago. Bradley had visited him in prison. The two of them were shaking hands through the plexiglass like old business partners closing a deal. I closed the folder and sat in the dark for a long time, trying to understand what I had become part of. I was a history teacher. I taught kids about the Constitution and the Civil War and the Great Depression. I graded essays on the New Deal and led parent-teacher conferences and coached the debate team to 3rd place at the state competition. I was not a man who made deals with federal agents in abandoned warehouses, but I was also not a man who let his children be raised by someone like Bradley Vance. I drove back to my apartment in the rental car, the folder riding shotgun, my mind churning through possibilities like a washing machine full of rocks. The man had said he would be in touch. He had said I would know what to do. He had said the information in the folder would be enough to bring Bradley down. I didn't believe him for a second. I had learned something in the weeks since Natalie had left, something that no amount of teaching experience could have prepared me for. When you're fighting someone like Bradley, nothing is ever enough. He had money, connections, and a willingness to destroy anyone who stood in his way. I had a folder and a burner phone and a rage that had been building for months, feeding on itself like a fire that couldn't find oxygen. I needed more. I called Maggie Chun at 2 a.m. She answered on the second ring, her voice rough with sleep, but sharpening fast. "Ethan, what happened? I need you to do something for me. Name it. I need you to get a message to Olivia. Tell her I need to see her alone. Tomorrow morning before school. You want me to be your go-between with your own daughter? Bradley has people watching me. I can't go near the school. I can't go near the house. But Olivia knows how to get around him. She's been doing it for months." The pause stretched long enough that I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. When Maggie spoke again, her voice had lost its sleepiness and gained something heavier. "She's a kid, Ethan. I know. Don't put her in danger." "I won't. I just need information." "About what?" "About her mother." The next morning, I sat in a coffee shop in Old Town Scottsdale, nursing a cup of black coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The place was busy with tourists and locals, the kind of spot where no one would notice a man waiting alone at a corner table, his eyes fixed on the door. Olivia walked in at 7:45, 15 minutes before school started. She wore her uniform Mountain View polo shirt and jeans and carried a backpack that looked too heavy for her frame. She spotted me immediately and walked over, her face unreadable in a way that broke my heart. "Dad, leave." She sat down across from me, her eyes scanning the room. checking for anyone she recognized. It was a gesture that made me proud and terrified in equal measure, because no 16-year-old should have to check a room like that. Maggie said you needed to see me. I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. I always tell you the truth. Not always. You told me Mom was scared of Bradley. You told me she wanted to come home, but you didn't tell me she was working with someone. Olivia's face went pale, the color draining so fast I thought she might faint. She looked down at the table, her hands folded in front of her, her shoulders hunched like she was bracing for a blow. Who told you that? A man I met last night. He said Mom reached out to him 6 months ago. He said she's been feeding him information about Bradley. She was silent for so long I thought she might not answer. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, and I had to lean forward to hear her. She made me promise not to tell you. Why? Because she said you would try to stop her. She said you would try to be the hero and get yourself killed. She said the only way to protect us was to let her do what she needed to do. Something cracked inside Maya wall I had built to keep the pain out, a barrier I had constructed between myself and the truth I couldn't face. It crumbled like drywall, and through the gap came a flood of things I should have felt weeks ago. She's been working against Bradley this whole time. Yes, and she never told me. She couldn't. If Bradley found out, he would have killed her. He would have killed all of us. I stared at my daughter, seeing her for the first time in weeks. She was 16 years old, and she had been carrying a secret that would have broken most adults. She had been protecting her mother, protecting her brother, protecting me, and she had done it without complaint, without cracking, without asking for help. How did you know? Mom told me the night she left. She said she needed me to be strong. She said she needed me to watch out for Tyler and make sure you didn't do anything stupid. Did she tell you who she was working with? No. She said it was better if I didn't know. She said the less I knew, the safer I would be. I reached across the table and took her hand. She let me, her fingers cold and small in mine, and I felt the tremor running through them. I'm going to end this, Liv. I'm going to take Bradley down, and I'm going to bring your mother home. How? I don't know yet, but I have information. I have evidence, and I have people who want to help. People like the man you met last night. Yes. Can you trust him? No, but I don't need to trust him. I just need to use him. Olivia looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It was not fear. It was not hope. It was something harder, something older, something that had been forged in the fire the past few months. It was the look of someone who had seen too much and learned too fast. Be careful, Dad. Bradley is not stupid. He knows you're coming for him. He knows. Mom told me he's been preparing. He has people watching your apartment. He has people watching the school. He knows you went to the party. He knows you talked to Derek. How does he know? Because Derek told him. Bradley made him tell. He said he would cut off his tuition if he didn't cooperate. The cold rage settled into my Bonisa fury that burned without heat, a darkness that had no end. Bradley was using his own son as a spy, turning his family into informants, treating everyone around him like pieces on a chessboard. He's using his own kid. Bradley uses everyone. That's what Mom said. That's why she had to get out. I squeezed Olivia's hand and let go. I had what I needed. I had confirmation. I had a target. Go to school, I said. Act normal. Don't tell anyone we talked. What are you going to do? I'm going to finish this. I watched her walk out of the coffee shop, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her head held high. She was my daughter, and she was braver than I had ever been. I pulled out my burner phone and called the number the man had given me. It rang twice before he answered. Mr. Cole, I need to meet. Where? The warehouse. Tonight, 10 p.m. I'll be there, and I need a gun. The pause stretched, so long I thought he might have hung up. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder, more serious, stripped of the professional calm he had worn like a suit. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. 10 p.m. I'll bring what you need. The line went dead. I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, watching the morning unfold around me. People came and went, laughing, talking, living their lives as if the world were still a safe place. I envied them. I resented them. I wanted to grab them by the shoulders and tell them that the ground beneath their feet was not as solid as they thought, that the people they trusted might be hiding things, that the life they had built could crumble in a single night. But I didn't. I paid for my coffee and walked out into the Arizona sun, the folder tucked under my arm, the weight of what I was about to do pressing down on my shoulders like a physical thing. I was a history teacher, but I was also a father, and I was about to show Bradley Vance exactly what that meant. The warehouse transformed after midnight. In daylight, it was just another forgotten building on the industrial fringe of Scottsdale, but darkness gave it a different character: watchful, patient, the kind of place where secrets went to die. I parked my rental 3 blocks away and walked, keeping to the shadows where the streetlights couldn't reach, my footsteps echoing off the empty storefronts and cracked sidewalks that had once been part of someone's American dream. The side door was unlocked, just like before. I slipped inside and stood motionless, letting my eyes adjust to the blackness. The smell hit me: first dust and oil and the sweet rot of decay, but underneath it, something else. Metallic, sharp, the kind of scent I'd read about in a dozen history books describing the aftermath of battlefields. Blood. Recent blood. Mr. Cole. The voice came from my left, low and controlled. I turned and found him standing in the shadow of a support beam, his silhouette cut against the faint glow from a high window. He held something in his right hand, and even in the dark I could see the shape of it. A gun. "You're early," he said. "You said 10. It's 9:47. I know. I've been here since 8. He stepped forward into the dim light, and for the first time I saw his face without shadows. Younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with a lean, coiled build of someone who'd spent years operating in places where being noticed meant being dead. His eyes were the color of slate, flat and unreadable, and he wore a dark jacket over a collared shirt. The kind of man who could walk into any room and disappear. "You brought the gun?" "I brought something better." He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope, thick enough to carry weight. "This is everything. Bank records, wire transfers, shell company registrations, witness statements from 3 former employees. Bradley Vance has been laundering money for the Castillo cartel for 7 years. He's moved over $40 million through his development projects." I took the envelope but didn't open it. The paper felt warm, like it had been pressed against his body for hours. Why now? Because he's about to move his operation. He's selling his company to a foreign entity and disappearing. If he gets out of the country, we lose him. The evidence becomes useless. How long do I have? 3 days. Maybe less. I looked at the envelope in my hands. This was what I'd wanted. The weapon I'd asked for. But it felt wrong, not heavy enough, not sharp enough, not enough to undo what had been done to my family. "I asked for a gun. I know, but you're not the kind of man who uses one. You don't know what kind of man I am. I know you're a teacher. I know you've never fired a weapon outside of shooting range. I know you have 2 children who need their father to come home." He paused, and something shifted in his voice, softer, almost human. "And I know that if you kill Bradley Vance, you become him. You become the man who solves problems with violence. Is that the example you want to set for your daughter?" I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could form the words, a sound cut through the silence. A phone. Ringing. Not mine. His. He pulled it from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and his face changed. The professional calm cracked, replaced by something I hadn't seen in him before. "Fear. What is it?" He answered without looking at me. "Go." He listened for 10 seconds. 15. Then he lowered the phone and met my eyes with an expression I couldn't read. "Your wife has been taken." The words hit me like a physical blow, right in the center of my chest. I felt them in my ribs, in my stomach, in the hollow space behind my breastbone where hope had been living. "Where?" "Bradley's house." She went there to confront him. Told him she was done working with the feds. Told him she was going to testify. "Is she alive?" "For now." "He's using her as bait. He wants you to come." "How do you know?" "Because he called the FBI field office and told them. He wants it public. He wants everyone to know that you came for him and that he won." I looked at the envelope in my hands. I looked at the man standing in front of me. I looked at the darkness around us, the same darkness that had swallowed my life and left nothing but ashes. "I'm going. Mr. Cole, I'm going. Give me the gun or don't. But I'm going." He studied me for a long moment, his slate eyes searching mine for something I wasn't sure I had. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a SIG Sauer, matte black, the kind of weapon I'd only ever seen in movies and police evidence photos. Take it, but listen to me. He held it out, but didn't let go. Bradley Vance has been preparing for this. He has security. He has cameras. He has people who will shoot you on sight. If you walk through that door, you're not coming back. I know. You have 2 children who need a father. I know. Your daughter is watching you. She will remember every decision you make tonight. I met his eyes and held them. I know. He let go of the gun. It settled into my hand, heavier than I'd expected, cold and solid and real. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me. Just come back alive. I turned and walked out of the warehouse, the gun tucked into my waistband beneath my jacket, the envelope under my arm, the weight of everything was about to do pressing down on me like 1,000 pounds of stone. The drive to Paradise Valley took 20 minutes. I spent them in silence, my hands gripping the wheel, my mind empty of everything except the image of Natalie's face. I had been angry at her for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to love her. But as I drove toward the house where she was being held, I remembered. I remembered the way she laughed at bad jokes. I remembered the way she held my hand in the dark. I remembered the way she looked at me on our wedding day, young and hopeful and sure that we would never hurt each other. We had been wrong, but that didn't mean I could let her die. Bradley's house was a monument to his ego, 6,000 square feet of glass and stone, perched on a hill like a fortress watching over the valley. Lights blazed from every window, making the place glow like a ship on a dark sea. A black SUV sat in the circular driveway, engine running, exhaust curling into the cold night air. 2 men stood by the front door, their hands visible at their sides, their postures alert. I parked at the bottom of the driveway and got out. The gun pressed against my spine, hidden by my jacket. The envelope was in my hand. I walked up the driveway, my footsteps loud on the gravel, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. One of the men stepped forward. Mr. Cole, I'm here to see Bradley. He's expecting you. He opened the door and gestured for me to enter. I stepped inside and found myself in a foyer that opened into a living room the size of my entire apartment. Bradley was sitting on a white leather couch, a glass of whiskey in his hand, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Ethan, I was wondering when you'd show up. Where is she? She's safe. For now. He took a sip of his whiskey and gestured to the couch across from him. Sit. Let's talk. I don't want to talk. I know. You want to fight. You want to be the hero. But that's not how this ends. Where is she? He sighed, set down his glass, and stood. He was taller than I remembered, broader through the shoulders, the kind of man who had always used his size to intimidate. But I wasn't intimidated anymore. I was past fear. She's in the guest room. She's fine. I didn't hurt her. He walked toward me, his hands in his pockets, his smile never wavering. I don't hurt women, Ethan. That's not who I am. Then let her go. I will. After we finish our conversation. What conversation? He stopped a few feet from me and looked at me with something that might have been pity. I know you have evidence. I know you've been working with the feds. And I know that you think you can destroy me. I can. No, you can't. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. He tapped the screen and held it up so I could see. It was a video. Olivia, sitting in a chair, her hands bound, her face pale under harsh fluorescent light. Dad, the word hit me like a knife to the gut. Dad, I'm sorry. He came to the school. He said he had a message from Mom. I didn't. The video cut off. I looked at Bradley. The smile was gone. His eyes were cold, flat, empty of everything except calculation. Here's how this works, Ethan. You give me the evidence. You walk away. You never see your wife again. But your daughter goes free. I'll kill you. No, you won't. Because if I die, my people kill Olivia. If I go to prison, my people kill Olivia. The only way she lives is if I walk free. I stood there, the gun pressing against my spine, the envelope heavy in my hand, the weight of every choice I had made crushing me into the ground. I had thought I was the hero. I had thought I could save everyone. I had been wrong. Give me the envelope, Ethan. I held it out. He took it. Good. Now get out of my house. I turned and walked toward the door, my legs shaking, my vision blurring. I had lost. I had lost everything. But as I stepped into the night, I heard something that made me stop. A sound. A whisper. A voice I knew. Dad. I turned. Olivia was standing in the doorway of the guest room, her hands free, her face hard and set like stone. I am okay. Behind her, I saw Natalie. Alive. Whole. Holding a phone in her hand like a weapon. Bradley, Natalie said, her voice steady as a surgeon's hand, the FBI has been recording this entire conversation. You just confessed to kidnapping, extortion, and conspiracy to commit murder. Bradley's face went white. The color drained from his cheeks like water running out of a sink, leaving nothing but shock and the slow dawn of understanding. And in that moment, I understood too. Natalie hadn't been taken. She had been working. She had set him up, and I had been the bait. Ethan, she said, her eyes meeting mine across the vast space of that room. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, but I needed him to think he had one. I looked at my wife, the woman who had broken my heart and saved my daughter, and I didn't know whether to kiss her or kill her. But I knew one thing for certain. The war was over, and we had won. Epilogue: the house on Maple Drive has a porch swing now. I never thought I'd be the kind of man who owns one, but here I am at 6:30 in the morning, coffee in hand, watching the sun climb over the rooftops of this quiet Scottsdale neighborhood. It's a rental, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a backyard with a lemon tree that Tyler insists on watering every morning, even though I've told him 3 times that citrus doesn't need daily attention. He does it anyway. I let him. The trial ended 4 months ago. Bradley Vance is serving 22 years at a federal facility in Colorado. His assets were seized, his company dissolved, his name stripped from every building and plaque and scholarship fund that had once carried it like a badge of honor. The news coverage lasted 3 weeks, then faded into the background noise of a country that had already moved on to the next scandal. I watched it all from the gallery of the courthouse, sitting next to Natalie, our shoulders not quite touching, the space between us filled with everything we hadn't said and probably never would. We're not back together. That's the part people don't understand. They see us at the school play, sitting in the same row, and they assume we've reconciled. They see me drop Tyler off at her apartment on Sunday evenings, and they think we're working it out. But the truth is more complicated than that. The truth is that some wounds don't heal just because you win. Some wounds scar over, and you learn to live with the ache, the way you learn to live with a knee that clicks before rain or a shoulder that aches when the barometric pressure drops. Natalie saved our daughter. I will never forget that. I will never stop being grateful for the way she stood in that doorway, the phone in her hand, her voice steady while she destroyed the man who had tried to destroy us. But gratitude is not the same as trust, and trust is not the same as love. And love, I've learned, is not the same as forgiveness. I'm working on the forgiveness part. That's what I told Dr. Patel, my therapist, who has the patience of a saint and the directness of a drill sergeant. You don't have to forgive her to move on, she said last week. You just have to stop punishing yourself for not being ready. Olivia is a senior now. She got into Arizona State, early admission, and she's planning to study criminal justice. I didn't see that coming. I thought she'd want to be a writer or a filmmaker or something creative. But after everything that happened, she told me she wants to be the person who puts people like Bradley Vance away. She wants to be the one holding the phone, recording the confession, making sure the bad guys don't win. I told her I was proud of her. She rolled her eyes and said, I know, Dad. You tell me every day. I do. I will never stop. Tyler is in 8th grade now. He's taller than he was a year ago, gangly and awkward in the way that 13-year-old boys are, his voice cracking mid-sentence like a radio station losing signal. He doesn't talk about what happened. He doesn't talk about the night in the guest room, or the video Bradley showed me, or the moment he saw his mother standing in the doorway with a phone in her hand. He talks about video games and basketball and the girl in his science class who has braces and a laugh that makes him blush. I let him have his silence. I know that some things can't be forced out. They have to be waited out like a splinter working its way to the surface. I'm back at Mountain View High School. The school board reinstated me after the investigation cleared me of all wrongdoing. The superintendent made a public apology. The parents who had whispered behind my back sent emails and cards, some sincere, some performative. I accepted them all with the same measured grace I had learned over 19 years of teaching. I didn't hold grudges. I didn't keep score. I just showed up every morning and taught my classes and tried to remember that the kids in front of me had their own battles, their own secrets, their own parents who might be lying to them. Derek Vance graduated. I saw him at the ceremony, sitting in the front row, his mother's seat empty beside him. He looked older than 18. He looked like a boy who had been forced to grow up too fast, forced to choose between a father he loved and a truth he couldn't ignore. I don't know what he told the prosecutors. I don't know what role he played in his father's downfall. But I know that he testified, and I know that his testimony helped put Bradley away, and I know that he did it knowing it would cost him everything. I saw him at the grocery store last month. He was buying milk, cereal, and a bag of apples. He saw me, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Mr. Cole." And I said, "Derek." And then he walked past me, and I let him go. Maggie still works in the classroom next to mine. She still calls me out when I'm being a martyr. She still brings me coffee on the days she can tell I haven't slept. She's dating a man who teaches physics at the community college, and she's happy in a way I haven't seen her happy in years. I'm happy for her. I mean that. Frank, my father, still lives in his retirement community in Mesa. He doesn't talk about what happened. He never did. But he came to the trial, sat in the back row, and stayed for the whole thing. When it was over, he shook my hand and said, "You did good, son." That was the closest he's ever come to saying he was proud of me. I took it. The porch swing creaks as I shift my weight. The coffee is getting cold. I should go inside and wake Tyler up for school. I should check my email and see if there's anything from the department chair about next week's faculty meeting. I should live my normal, ordinary, unremarkable life. But I sit here a little longer, watching the sun climb higher, feeling the weight of everything that happened settle into my bones like a second skeleton. I think about the warehouse. I think about the gun I never fired. I think about Natalie's voice on the phone, steady as a surgeon's hand, and the look in her eyes when she said she was sorry. I think about Olivia, asleep in her room, dreaming about the future she's building. I think about Tyler, who waters the lemon tree every morning even though I've told him it doesn't need it. I think about the porch swing and how I never thought I'd be the kind of man who owns one. And I think about forgiveness. Not the kind that comes easy, not the kind that wraps everything up in a neat little bow, but the kind that takes time. The kind that you work on, day by day, even when you don't feel ready. I'm working on it. That's the best I can do. I set the coffee cup down on the railing, stand up, and walk inside to wake my son. The sun is up. The day is starting. And I'm still here, still breathing, still trying to figure out what comes next. That's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.